Good day, class. So right now, for our next lesson, we will discuss about the trigonometric functions. You probably learned about these fundamental concepts in your junior high school. So we will just recall what you have learned. We have these two functions, cosine t and sine t. So before we describe these functions, let us just look at this right triangle. So this is a right triangle, meaning one angle is equal to 90 degrees. So this angle, we'll call it angle T, which is in radians. Okay. So opposite of this angle is this side. We call it opposite. So this is just short for opposite. And this side, we call this the adjacent side. And this is the hypotenuse, or this is the longest side of a right triangle. Now, these functions cosine and sine are used to describe the ratio of the sides of this triangle. So cosine t or cos t is the ratio of the adjacent side to the hypotenuse. Sine t, on the other hand, or this is sine of the angle t, is just equal to the ratio of the opposite side over the hypotenuse. So basic. That's too basic. And we also have the third function, diba? You are familiar with tangent. So tangent t is equal to the ratio of the opposite side over the adjacent side. Okay, so that's it. So now, suppose we have this circle. So this is a unit circle, meaning the radius is equal to 1. So kung 1 yung radius niya, ibig sabihin lahat ng distance na to are equal to 1. So the distance from this point, the origin to this, is equal to 1. And this point, kung general description pa to, this is point x and y. Okay? So by distance formula, we know that distance is equal to the square root of the increment in x plus the increment or the change in y. Okay? So, for the change in x, that would be this distance. So, since nag-start tayo with the origin, so this is just simply x and this is simply y. So, therefore, our distance, which is d squared, if we transpose this to the other side, this is now d squared, which is equal to 1, equal to the change in x squared plus the change in y squared. Or simply, we have the equation of a circle, x squared plus y squared equal to 1. So, this is an equation of a unit circle kasi yung radius niya is equal to 1. Now, suppose we consider this point and we call it point P sub t. Okay, t describes this angle here. So since the angle dire is equal to t, so we call this point the point na referred from if we have the central angle equal to t. Okay, now this is now the arc length of the angle t. And remember, this is a unit circle. Okay, now in terms of coordinates, if we call this point A has coordinates 1 and 0. Okay, so ito yung coordinate niya. And how about PT? So PT has these coordinates, meaning galing siya doon sa unit, this ratio. Galing siya from this ratio. So remember that this is x and this is y, right? So if we relate it to the ratio cosine t, that would be adjacent over hypotenuse, right? So therefore, x is simply cosine t. Same with sine t, that is opposite, which is y, over hypotenuse, which is 1. So therefore, y is just sine t. So let me erase this. So therefore, the coordinates of point P sub t is just cosine, which is x, and sine t, which is y. Or cosine t and sine t. Okay? So that's it. Now, about the angles, so if our point is right here, that would be P sub 0 because angle T is here at this point. Now, if our point is right here, so the angle now is this. This is now P. If in degrees, that would be P sub 90 degrees. But since we are using radians, this would be P sub pi over 2. Okay? Because this measure here, from here to here, this is pi, right? And I know na mas sanay tayo sa degrees, and we know that radians or pi radians or isang pi is 180 degrees. Okay, yung pi kasi that is measured in radian, and actually pi is a ratio and has no unit, di ba? Asan ba yung galing yung pi? If you recall, the circumference of a circle is just pi d, or pi is just the ratio of the circumference and the diameter. So since circumference and diameter has the same unit, so pi has no unit. So we just write rad, or that is just to describe pi as radians. But actually, in terms of units, wala siyang unit. So balik tayo dito. This is pi. So yung half niya from to here is just pi over 2. Now let's have this definition. The radian measure of angle AOP sub t. So we are describing AOP sub t. So the angle measure here is t radians. Okay? So ito daw is t radians. So yun yung tinatawag na radian measure. It is different from using sexagesimal system, which uses degrees. So again, ito, pi radians is 180 degrees. So, yung 90 degrees is just pi over 2, and yung 270 degrees is is pi 3 pi over 2. Okay? Or negative pi over 2. So that's it. So for our angle conversion, if we want to change radians to degrees, for example, if we have pi radian, we just need to multiply this with the ratio 180 degrees is to pi. So whatever is the angle in radians here, if you want to convert it to degrees, so you just multiply by pi over 180 over pi, I mean. Pero kung baliktad naman, we have degrees then to radians. So baliktarin natin yung ratio, that would be pi over 180. So ganun lang siya. Now let's have this example. So since we are in lesson 13, so we'll call this problem 13 dash 1. That would be dash 1. Arc length and sector area. An arc of radius r subtends an angle t, okay, at the center of the circle. Find length s of the arc and the area of the sector lying between the arc and the center of the circle. Okay, so let us first illustrate this particular problem. So we have a circle with ito yung the center. Tapos anong sabi? An arc of a circle of radius r, so yung radius niya is r. So this is r. Subtends an angle t. So suppose this is the subtended angle here. So this is the subtended angle t. So of course it's also r. Okay. Find the length s of the arc. Length of the arc. So this is the length of the arc. Ito. So we will be calling this s. Okay. And the area of the sector. So the area of the sector, of course, is this area. We are describing this area. Okay? So how do we solve this? Ang unang gagawin natin is to consider the whole circle. Okay? For the whole circle, the angle subtended is this angle, which is 2 pi. Right? So we are comparing it if ang subtended angle lang is t. Okay? Since uniform naman yung shape ng circle natin, all throughout this, pareho lang yung yung behavior niya. So meaning, we could do ratio and proportion for this. So if we use S, we could, if we want to find S, we compare it to the whole circumference. Because S is just a portion of the whole circumference. So sabihin natin, S is to the whole circumference as angle T is to the whole subtended angle for the circle. Okay? So, pwede natin gamitin yung ratio na yon or proportions na yon. So, we have S, or how about in terms of angles na lang? S, para sa S, it is subtended by the angle T, which is proportional if we have the whole circumference, and the whole circumference, ang angle niya is 2 pi. Or ito, yung angle niya for the whole circumference. And since we know that circumference, we know that for a fact, that circumference is 2 pi r, right? Or pi d over the same 2 pi. So we could cancel out 2 pi. So therefore, solving for S, S is just simply r times t. In terms of radians, ito siya. Yun na yung dinidescribe ng radian. So if we have a unit circle, wherein r is equal to 1, or r is equal to 1, ito siya is just t, right? T to siya, t din ito siya. Diba? Kasi unit circle siya, that is just radius times t, and 1 siya dito. So therefore, the length of S depends on kung gaano kalayo yung rim niya, or gaano kalayo or gaano kahaba yung radius. So the greater the radius, of course, mas malaki yung value ng S. So if the radius is 0, of course, wala tayong S. Diba? Okay. Now, in terms of area, ganun din yung gagawin natin sa area. We will compare this portion of this whole area. Okay? So we will compare this area to the area of the whole circle. So we'll do the same proportions. So we have area of the sector is to the subtended angle T. As to the area of the whole circle, so isulat ko na lang, circle, as to 2 pi, kasi yung angle niya. Okay? So therefore, area of the sector over T is equal to, the area of the circle is just, that's pi r squared. So over 2 pi. So from here, we could cancel out pi. Hence, the area of a sector, area of a sector is equal to 1/2 r squared t, where t is in radians again. So that should be the same description as here. T should be in radians, or we should specify that t is in radians. So that's it. Yun yung pag-answer dun sa problem na yan. Now, looking back at this circle, let us first draw some generalizations. So let me copy this and paste it right here. Palakihan natin konti. Ayan. So let us draw some generalizations. So what would the angle be if t is 0? Or what would the ratios cosine and sine be? That's what I mean. So we'll start with sine 0. So what would be opposite over hypotenuse of sine 0? So kung sine 0, that means yung t is 0. How do we illustrate that? So imagine lang natin that it is not 0 but very very close to 0. So kung very very close to 0, yung angle natin sobrang liit lang ganyan. Ganun lang yung angle natin. Diba? Dito dapat. Dito. Dito. Ayan, sobrang liit. So if this is close to 0, of course, this is also close to 0. So sine 0 is equal to opposite, which is 0 over hypotenuse 1. So sine 0 is just 0. Okay? And cosine 0 is equal to, kung cosine 0 naman, the same pa rin. Ganon. Cosine is adjacent to this side. And this adjacent side is close to 1, right? That's close to 1. Kung ang angle natin is close to 0 here, di na makita. Ayan. So, kung ang cosine ng 0, imagine that this is a very small angle na, close to 0. So, meaning this value is also close to 0. And this value is very close to 1. And the hypotenuse is 1. So, cosine 0 is 1 over 1. So, that is just equal to 1. Okay. So, following this pattern, we could also see that the sine of pi over 2 is equal to 1. Okay. And the cosine of pi over 2 is equal to 0. Okay? Or sine of 90 is 1, cosine of 90 is 0. How about sine of 180 or pi? Sine of pi. So, eto na tayo dito. So, that would be opposite over hypotenuse, the same pa rin. Ang opposite dyan is almost close to 0. So, sine pi is 0. And cosine pi is adjacent niya is ito pa rin yung adjacent niya, pero our direction is now at the negative side of the Cartesian plane. So that would be negative 1 over hypotenuse 1. So negative 1 over 1, that would be negative 1. So cosine pi is negative 1. So how about for sine negative pi over 2, negative pi over 2, or 3 pi over 2, or positive 3 pi over 2. So, pwede din ganun. Okay, pwede 3 pi over 2. Sige, ito na lang. That would be equal to, ito na yung angle natin. Ito na siya. This now ang atong i-describe natin na line. So, ito yung adjacent line din. So, opposite niya would be what? That is actually the same as dito. Pero, nasa baba na siya. So, that would be negative 1. Okay. Negative 1. And yung cosine natin, negative pi over 2, is equal to 0. And we are now done with the basic sa fundamentals ng unit circles. So, i-generalize na lang natin. Let us just cut the whole discussion short. Hindi lang tayo mag-detail. So, how about if we just reconstruct this triangle again? At this time, let's call this angle theta. And the opposite side, let's call that A. The adjacent side, let's call that B. And the hypotenuse is called that C. So far, what we've learned is this ratio. Okay? We have sine theta equal to the opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. And idagdag na lang din natin yung tangent theta, which is opposite over adjacent. Okay? And we also have reciprocal functions. Yung mga kabaliktaran, yung mga reciprocal nito. We have the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So, cosecant theta is C over A. Okay? Let me make that clear here. You have cosecant theta, that's the reciprocal of sine theta, so that is C over A. We have secant theta, that's the reciprocal of cosine theta, so we have C over B. And cotangent theta, that's the reciprocal of tangent theta, so we have B over A. So ito yung mga functions na kailangan natin tandaan. Now, from the unit circle we've learned, we know that B is equal to the cosine of the subtended angle. So this is cosine theta, and kasi kanina yung unit circle, yung radius niya is 1. So this time the radius is C. So B is equal to C cosine theta. Or we could refer that to here. Ito. So solving for B, you just transfer C to the other side. So C cosine theta. Okay? And A is C sine theta. So, ayan. So, that's it. So, from the Pythagorean theorem, we know that C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared. That is the same property that we used here. Ito, Pythagorean gihapon ni siya. Diba? Yung distance formula is still Pythagorean. Using this property, we could say this. Okay? So, how about if I just transfer that here? Ito, we know that C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared. So, therefore, C squared is equal to A, which is, ano yung A? That is C sine theta squared plus B, which is C cosine theta squared. Ayan. A is C sine theta, B is C cosine theta. Just substituted it here. So we'll have C squared is equal to C squared sine theta squared theta plus C squared cosine squared theta. By the way, yung sine theta squared could be written as sine squared theta. That means, kasi kung nandito yung exponent natin nasa gitna, it means that we are raising to 2 this whole expression, etong whole expression. That is, be careful kasi kung ito yung 2, dito mo nilagay, meaning ang naka-square lang dyan is yung theta. Pero yung if etong 2 is nandito, meaning ang naka-square is the whole expression. Okay? So we have this. Now, if we factor out C squared, that's common sa dalawang term. So we have C squared is equal to C squared times sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta. So from here, we divide both sides by C squared. So cancel na to siya. So we have sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta equal to 1. Galing dito, we can now draw what we call, or we can now call this the Pythagorean, sorry, wrong spelling. Pythagorean identities. So, yung Pythagorean identities is just, eto na siya, ganun pa rin, galing dito. So, ano yung mga Pythagorean identities? Let's just derive it from our mother identity, so to speak. Ito na ang tawagin nating mother identity. So, from there, we could say that sine squared theta is equal to 1 minus cosine squared theta. That is simply transferring cosine squared theta to the other side of the equation. Likewise, cosine squared theta is just the same as 1 minus sine squared theta. Okay? Now, if we divide all terms by sine squared theta, this is sine squared theta, this is sine squared theta. So, this becomes 1, and this becomes, kulang tayo ng identity. So, may balikan tayo konti. Dito, dito, sa tangent theta, let me add that here. Sa tangent theta, we have A over B. So, tangent theta is A over B, and we know that A is C sine theta and B is C cosine theta. So, sulat ko lang muna dito, temporary. A is C sine theta and B is C cosine theta. So, cancel this out. So, tangent theta is just equal to sine theta over cosine theta. So, that means cotangent theta is the reciprocal of this. So, that's cosine theta over sine theta. So, that's cotangent. Okay. Gamitin natin siya dito. So, balikan natin to. So, we have sine squared theta over sine squared theta. Suppose we divide all terms by sine squared theta. So, therefore, we have this as 1. Ito naman is the reciprocal of tangent squared, right? Or this is cotangent squared. So, that is 1 plus cotangent squared theta equal to, dito kanina, that's 1 over sine squared, di ba? The reciprocal of sine squared is cosecant squared. So that's equal to cosecant squared theta. So this is another Pythagorean identity that you need to memorize. You need to memorize this, or kung di mo memorize, balikan nyo ulit yung derivation natin. So from here, we could also say that cotangent, paiba-iba ng color. We could also say that cotangent squared theta is equal to cosecant squared theta minus 1. And we could also say that, ano pa? Ganun pa rin. Pareho lang. Okay? Now, if we divide all terms by cosine squared theta, what will happen? So, ito magiging 1. Ito magiging tangent squared. Ito magiging reciprocal ng cosine is secant. So, therefore, we say that we say that tangent squared theta plus 1 is equal to secant squared theta. That's another identity that you need to memorize. So it also follows that tangent squared theta is secant squared theta minus 1. We could also derive identities from even and odd functions, but para mas madaling maintindihan, let's just call this the negative angle identities. Gagawin natin, let's referring again to the unit circle, pero yung i-drawing natin is a circle with, So, ang gagawin natin, similar to kanina, we'll draw a triangle with angle theta. So, mag-drawing ulit tayo ng the same triangle, another triangle, pero yung theta, instead na counterclockwise, yung theta, i-measure natin ng clockwise para maging negative siya. Let's just say na this is the same as this because this is theta, this is also theta, pero opposite yung direction niya. So, this is negative theta. Okay? Again, this side is B, this side is A, and this side is C. Okay? So, if this side is C, and this is also negative theta, theta pa rin siya pero opposite ng direction, this is also C. And the opposite side is also A, pero nasa baba na siya or nasa baba na siya. So, that is negative A there. Okay? So, yung negative angle identity is this. Ano yung mga values ng sine negative theta? Okay? So, yung sine negative theta is equal, again, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so A over C. So, sine negative theta is equal to negative A over C. So, therefore, sine negative theta is equal to negative A over C. And what is A over C? Balikan natin dito. A over C is just sine theta. So, sine negative theta is just negative sine theta. Okay? Or pwede ito yung tingnan natin. A over C is opposite over hypotenuse of angle theta. Okay? Let's proceed to cosine negative theta. For cosine negative theta, that's B, ito, B over C. And B over C is the same as cosine theta. So therefore, cosine negative theta is just equal to cosine theta. And for this triangle, B over C is cosine theta. For this triangle, B over C is also cosine negative theta nga lang. Also the same, but cosine negative theta. Now, let's proceed to tangent negative theta. For tangent negative theta, that would be negative A over B. So that's equal to negative A over B. And A over B is tangent, right? So tangent negative theta is equal to negative tangent theta. So that's it. So let me highlight these functions. So ito, you need to memorize this, and memorize this. Now, next. Kung di ma-memorize, then you can always go back to this derivation. Let's have cosecant negative theta. Cosecant negative theta is just the reciprocal of this. Ayan na. The reciprocal of this. So that's negative C over A gihapon. So that is just equal to negative cosecant theta. And from here, we could just generalize na yung property for its reciprocal is the same for these base functions, sine, cosine, and tangent. So sa mga reciprocal niya, the same din yung mangyayari. So we could say that secant, since secant is the reciprocal of cosine, so secant of negative theta is just equal to, ano yung property dito, naging positive lang. So that is just secant theta. And cotangent of negative theta is just equal to negative cotangent theta. Okay, that's it. So you have all these functions to memorize. So ilan na yung dapat i-memorize? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 pa lang. Marami pa. Mga 1,000 pa. Okay? Next. For our next identity, complementary angle identity. So, you know from your basic geometry that when we say complementary angles, that means angles that forms 90 degrees. So, if we have this angle, 90-degree angle, if we cut that in two, then you have two complementary angles. Ganitohin na lang natin. Ayan. So, you have two complementary angles which are this angle and this angle. Okay? So, ang gagawin ko dito is I'll close it like this. Now, if this is angle theta, this angle is the complement of theta. So, when we say complement of theta, that angle measures 90 minus theta or pi over 2 minus theta. So, this is pi over 2 minus theta. Because if you add these two, the result is pi over 2. Or you could also, kung i-generalize lang natin, it could be either radians or degrees. So we could use co to refer to it as complement. So that is complement of theta. Pwedeng co na lang ilagay natin dyan. Now, let us label the side. So, we are familiar with this triangle and we know that this side is A, this side is B, this side is C. So, that is easy to see that this side is also this side. So, this side is A and this side also this side. So, this side is B. Okay? Now, if we create now the functions or the ratios, we have starting with sine. Let's just use co to generalize. Sine complement of theta. So, yung angle natin is the complement of theta, this. So, sine is opposite, so that's B over hypotenuse. Ito, yun pa rin yung hypotenuse. So, ang opposite ng angle na to, ng complement ng theta is ito na, yung B na. Diba? So, B over C, that's cosine. So, therefore, the sine of the complement of theta is just equal to cosine theta. That is, yun na nga, kaya tinawag siyang cosine. So, cosine means complement of sine. Ganun lang siya. That's why, the sine of complement of theta is equal to the complement of sine of theta. Diba? Parang ganun lang. So, that means that the sine of 60 degrees is equal to the cosine of 30 degrees because they are complements. 60 and 30 are complements, right? And also, the sine of 45 degrees is the same as the cosine of 45 degrees because they are complements. Okay? Ganun lang ibig sabihin nun. So, we have this first complementary identity. So, if we have cosine complement of, complement of theta, that would be, I think pwedeng diretso na lang, no? What is the complement of the complement? So, bumalik lang tayo dun sa angle, di ba? So, sine. Parang navigate lang siya. Sine theta. I-prove natin sa figure the cosine of the complement of theta. So, this is the complement of theta. So, the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. That's exactly A over C. And A over C is sine. Ayun. So we have this. Now next, we have tangent. The tangent of the complement of theta. Okay? The tangent of the complement of theta is what? So tangent is opposite over adjacent. So opposite over adjacent, B over A is cotangent, diba? B over A is cotangent. Ayan. B over A is cotangent. Or, eto na lang. Madali lang naman tingnan, no? The tangent of the complement is theta is cotangent theta. Ayan. Cotangent theta. So, from there, parang alam na, di ba? Sige. How about ito? How about yung sa second theta? Second complement of theta, I mean. For the second of the complement of theta. Kung ito siya at ito siya are just reciprocal, so therefore, dapat ito and dito is just reciprocal. So, what is the reciprocal of sine? Ako na rin sasagot, that's cosecant theta. Or, again, the second of the complement of theta is just equal to the cosecant of theta. Ayan, cosecant of theta. Okay? So, ganun lang siya kadali. So, that means the cosecant, the complement of theta is just equal to, parang na-negate siya, the complement of the secant of the complement of theta is just na-negate yung complement secant. Okay? Or, pwede tayong tumingin sa sine. The reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So, therefore, that is equal to the reciprocal of cosine, which is secant. Okay? So, we have this to memorize. Kung di na memorize, you can always go back to this triangle. Okay? So, that's the complementary angles identity. Now, let's proceed to supplementary angle identity. Sa basic geometry, we know that supplementary angles are angles that forms 180 degrees. So, if we have a straight line here, and ito, ganito na lang. So, we reconstruct the triangle that we've been using here. So, this is theta, this is A, this is B, and this is C. Okay? Then, ito, the same triangle, i-flip natin to the other side. Okay? I-flip natin to the left. To the left, to the left. The same triangle, pero naka-flip lang, ha? Ayan. So, this is now our angle. Tapos, eto, this is A. Now, this is now negative B kasi nasa other side na siya ng Cartesian. And this is C. Now, what is this angle? Ako na rin sasagot. This angle is actually clockwise. That is positive, di ba? This is positive pi. Then, counterclockwise negative. This angle is the same as this angle. Pero, counterclockwise siya. So, that's negative theta. So, you add these two angles, we have pi plus negative theta. Or, pi minus theta. So, pwedeng ganun. So, we could say that this angle is pi minus theta. Pwedeng ganun. Okay? So, drawing now the identities, sine of pi minus theta, that's equal to opposite over hypotenuse, that's A over C. So, therefore, sine of pi minus theta is just equal to sine theta because A over C is sine theta. Now, let's proceed to cosine of pi minus theta. So, that's adjacent over hypotenuse. It's negative B over C. So, that means, dito ko lang isulat, cosine pi minus theta is equal to negative B over C is cosine theta. Okay? So, so far we have these two to memorize. And tangent pi minus theta is equal to opposite over adjacent, which is negative B, or negative A over B. And A over B is tangent. So, tangent pi minus theta is equal to negative tangent theta. So, that's the identity. memorize again. So, yung mga reciprocal, edi reciprocal din natin. That means, since we know that the reciprocal of sine is cosecant, so cosecant pi minus theta is equal to the reciprocal of sine again. So, that's cosecant theta. Now, for the reciprocal of cosine, that's secant pi minus theta, that's equal to negative secant theta. And the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent pi minus theta, so that means it's negative cotangent theta. So again, you have these all to memorize. So that's it. Okay, I hope you now start memorizing these formulas, identities. Now let's try some problems. Let's call this problem 13-2. Find the sine and cosine of pi over 4. Okay, or pi over 4 is 45 degrees. So, if we plot this angle, the Cartesian, that is half of 90 degrees. So, that is around right here. Okay, so this angle is pi over 4 because this whole angle is pi over 2. Then half of that is pi over 4. So that means if the angle is pi over 4, and since this line bisects this angle, or angular bisector siya, then parang sinabi din natin na it is the same as like a square tapos with 90 degree na side tapos nilagyan mo ng diagonal, diba? So we could say that this side is the same as this side. Okay? So if this is x and this is y, x is equal to y. But since we know sa unit circle that x squared plus y squared is equal to 1, okay, so that means x squared plus x squared is equal to 1. So 2x squared is equal to 1. So x is equal to 1 half. X squared is equal to 1 half. And finally, x is equal to 1 over square root of 2, or square root of 2 over 2. Okay, so this is now the value of x, and we know that x is equal to cosine the angle, cosine t, doon sa unang triangle natin. So this time, the angle is pi over 4. X is cosine pi over 4, which is equal to square root of 2 over 2. And sine, or y, which is equal to x, is sine pi over 4, which is also equal to square root of 2 over 2. So that's it. So these are the values of sine and cosine without using a calculator. Now let's try another one. How about if we have this and no need or di tayo gagamit ng calculator. We need to find the values of sine and cosine for the angles 60 degrees or pi over 3. So we'll call this problem 13-3. So yung hanapin natin is the angle for 60 degrees or pi over 3. Again, if we graph or if we plot that would be yung pi over 3, that would be 60 degrees, right? So let's say ito siya, and this is 60 degrees. Now, that is 60 degrees, and if we draw a right triangle using these sides, we have this. So this is 90 degrees, and the interior angles of any triangle is always 180. So if this is 90 degrees and this is 60 degrees, then therefore this is 30 degrees. Okay, and if this is 30 degrees and we flip this triangle, meaning ito siya, i-flip natin dito. Pag ganyan. Kung i-flip natin siya ng ganito, so what we have formed actually is an equilateral triangle. Kasi ito, this is also 30 degrees. So 30 plus 30 is 60. Then this is also 60 degrees. Kasi this is the same triangle na gi-flip lang or flip lang. Okay? So if this is a unit circle 1, this is also 1, and this whole side is 1. So kani siya or eto is 1 half, and eto is also 1 half. So by Pythagorean theorem, we could solve for this side. So for that side, that would be square root of 1 minus Pythagorean. Square root of 1 minus 1 half squared. Right? So that would be square root of 1 minus 1/4. So that would become square root of 4 minus 1. So the answer is square root of 3 over 2. Ito yung value dito. Ayan. Yan yung value ng etong side. Etong side. Altitude. So, if you want to get now the value of pi over 3, which is this, 60 degrees. This is also pi over 3. So, let's start with sine. Let's start with sine 60 degrees or pi over 3. That is opposite square root of 3 halves over hypotenuse 1, which is just square root of 3 over 2. Okay? Now, if we have cosine pi over 3, that is adjacent, so that's 1 half over hypotenuse 1. Ito, adjacent over hypotenuse, that's just equal to 1 half. So we have a value for sine 60 degrees and cosine 60 degrees. Now, how about for 30 degrees? So, balikan natin yung complementary identity, which is right here. For complementary identity, ayan, we have these identities. Okay? Or simply, the complement of sine, maling sign, maling problem. The complement of sine is simply cosine. So therefore, since 30 is complement of 60, therefore, the sine of 30 degrees, or that's pi over 6, is just equal to cosine of its complement, which is 60. So that's 1 half. So sine pi over 6 is 1 half, and cosine pi over 6, again, its complement is the sine of 60 or sine of pi over 3, which is square root of 3 over 2. So, ganun lang siya kadali. So, dyan na-derive yung mga, actually, these are special angles. Okay? These are special angles. So, if you notice, I will show you a table here of the values of special angles. Here are the values of special angles. So, if you notice, if we have from 0, 30, siningit lang natin yung 45 because special angle siya, nasa gitna. But the increment here is by 30. So 0 to 30 to 60 to 90, 120, 150, then 180. Then yung 45 and 135, siningit na lang because nasa gitna sila. So that's special angle gihapon. So for 0, of course, that's 0 radians, 30 is pi over 6 radians, 45 is pi over 4, and so on. So we only have 5 values. Ang 1 over square root of 2, this is simply square root of 2 over 2. The same pa rin siya. Rationalizing the denominator, that's square root of 2 over 2. So we only have these values na may pattern lang pa ulit-ulit. So 1 square root of 3 over 2, 1 over square root of 2, 1 half, then 0. Then babalik siya sa 1 half, 1 square root of over square root of 2, square root of 3 over 2, then negative, then 1 na, then rotate lang siya to 0 again. So, it's easy to see the pattern here. Okay? Or if we cannot memorize this, which is, kahit di naman kailangan memorize, because engineering, okay naman tayo mag-calculator. If you cannot memorize this, you can always go back to its derivation. Dami namang derivation para dito. Okay? So, that's it. So, let's have another problem. How do we solve sine 3 pi over 4 and cosine 4 pi over 3 without calculator? So let's call this problem 13-4. Okay. First, let us plot 3 pi over 4. So let's start with letter A. Okay. Letter A, let's plot 3 pi over 4. So ang 3 pi over 4, if this is pi, meaning parang sinabi din natin tatlong parts ng pi over 4. And we know that pi over 4 is ito. That's pi over 4. So, tatlong parts niya. So, ito yung 3 pi over 4. Right? So, we could draw the 3 pi over 4 dito. This is 3 pi over 4. And if this is 3 pi over 4, this is also, or this is pi over 4. Diba? So, if you recall again, dito sa example natin, asan na yung pi over 4? Eto, sa pi over 4, this side and this side are equal. Okay? Dito, that means this side and this side are equal. And if this is a unit circle, 1 to siya. Okay? So, if we start with sine 3 pi over 4, I could rewrite this as sine of supplement of pi over 4. Supplementary identity na siya. So, pwede ko siyang isulat as pi minus pi over 4. So, since we are using pi here, that means supplement. And what is now the supplement of sine? Balikan natin identity. Supplementary identity. Ito. The supplement of pi minus theta is sine theta. Or the sign of the supplement of pi minus theta is sine theta. So therefore, this is equal to sine pi over 4. And sine pi over 4, nasolve na natin siya. Asan na yung sine pi over 4? Ito. That's square root of 2 over 2 or 1 over square root of 2. It's square root of 2 over 2. So, ganun lang siya. Okay? So, we just use the supplementary identity to determine that value. A different approach for letter B. How do we solve letter B? So, we are trying to solve without using a calculator the cosine of 4 pi over 3. 4 pi over 3. Okay. So, 4 pi over 3, that is the same as 4/3 is 1 and 1/3. So, times pi, that would be 1 and 1/3 of pi. So, that's pi plus pi over 3. So, mapaplot natin siya easily with this. So, this is pi plus 1/3 of pi. So, 1/3 of pi, parang ni-half lang natin. We cut this into 3 equal parts. So, 1 pi or pi plus its 1/3. So, andito yung angle natin. I mean, this is now the location of the angle. So, this is 4 pi over 3. Okay? So, again, if this is pi over 3. Pi over 3. And we already solved a problem using pi over 3, right? Ito, that's pi over 3. So, that means itong distance na to, as we have solved kanina, this is 1. This is square root of 3 over 2. Ito. It's square root of 3 over 2, pero pababa na siya because nasa third quadrant. So, that means it's negative square root of 3 over 2. Okay? Okay. So, how do we find out cosine? Cosine is adjacent. So, eto over hypotenuse. So, eto. So, cosine now, we could rewrite cosine as, pwede siyang i-complement. Okay? Oh no, we could just, remember that this is 1/2. And that means, nasa negative 1/2 siya kasi nasa left side siya ng Cartesian. Ganun pala. Okay, so therefore, cosine 4 pi over 3, we'll be looking at this triangle na na-form now. That is just adjacent over hypotenuse. So, that's negative 1/2. So, ganun lang pala siya. Yun lang.